We're back.
Yo, we are officially back. This is Hater Radio. My name is Chris McLean. I'm here with my co-host, as usual, Ian Gibson. Ian, how the hell are you?
I'm doing good. I'm ready for the season to start.
Yeah, man. I mean, it feels like usual with any time we go into off season, it feels like it's forever from the last game, which was that beat down here in LA with Georgia destroying TCU. But, a lot happened. The Pac-12 is pretty much non-existent.
Dead.
For
nobody born before the Big East, this is what it was like.
Yeah.
This is exactly what it was like.
Oh, yeah. And then now Oregon and Washington have left to go to the Big Ten. So now UCLA, USC, Washington, and Oregon are now in the Big Ten. Big 12 added Utah, Colorado. I'm trying to think who else. I mean, it was a whole calamity. Like the Pac-12 was like trying to figure out a deal. Things fell through, and then they just all scattered. And it really started, well, technically with USC and UCLA, but then once Colorado left to go to the Big 12, it was, the writing was on the wall, and that was it. I mean, all those teams just started to flee, and now it looks like Stanford and Cal, are holding the bag, and there's, I really feel bad.
Is Oregon State, aren't they the other ones that are staying, or do they?
Yeah, Oregon State and Washington State are still in the Pac-12, but I mean, I know there was talks today about the ACC talking to the rest of the teams to maybe assimilate into the ACC, but it's such far logistics for all those teams that it really doesn't make too much sense. I know there was also talk of teams from the Mountain West, like San Diego State, UNLV, Fresno State, and Boise State, and then some from the AAC, which would include like SMU, USF, Tulane, and maybe Memphis, merging into a bigger conference. That has some potential because there's some big markets involved there. There's Dallas, there's New Orleans, there's Tampa Bay.
I was going to say Tampa.
And somewhat Memphis as well as a decent-sized market. So, there is some play there, obviously San Diego and all the other ones. But there is some interest there, but it just depends on what happens with the ACC. But let me just start with, normally I give like a breakdown of who we are, but I'm not going to do that this time because I think I'm going to put like an intro to who me and Ian are on the website and on the profile so that people can see it that way, because doing it every time is kind of ridiculous. So I'm just going to do it one time, and we'll put it up there, and you'll be able to know who we are. But a little bit of who we are. We're both Florida Gator fans. Obviously, I am. And, Ian is as well. But we both –
I know I'm not representing it tonight.
But you work for the Phillies, for the Threshers.
That is also true. Yeah.
So, both me and Ian work in production. Ian works for the Clearwater Threshers. I work in TV and film here in Hollywood. I've worked on Star Wars shows. I've worked recently on a Marvel show. And now I'm actually on the negotiating committee for my local for 728. So I'm really proud about that and making a difference with, labor negotiations. But we also I graduated from USF and he's going to USF currently. And so, we have the ties there. We cover both of those teams, but we also cover USC and UCLA, which I live nearby. So it's easier for me to tap into that. I have friends that are fans of both teams and people I work with. So I get to, hear what's the hubbub on the ground. It's mainly those four teams, but we also talk a lot about, almost every college football storyline, anything that's interesting. Ian, I give you credit because you have come up with some of the surprise teams over the last 5 years since we've been doing this together that you have found, like Coastal Carolina, UTSA, before anyone else even knew who they were. And it's a credit to you because you have done your research. And I will say that I feel like I know a lot about college football, but I defer to you on a lot of stuff because I know you know more specifics about a lot of teams, more so than I ever could, because you're very tapped into it. And that's what hopefully we will show on this show, that we are very knowledgeable as best we can. But as far as the show goes, what we're going to do today, we're going to do a season preview. We'll look at all the conferences. We'll look at the teams that we were talking about that we covered: USC, UCLA, South Florida, and Florida. And then we'll give our potential Heisman list, playoff teams, and then look at the week 0 games, which there's only really like 2 or 3 worth mentioning. So it's not
Notre Dame and I believe it's Navy. And then USC is playing, I think, San Diego State.
No, they're playing, I think it's San Jose State. Because San
Jose State. Yeah, I keep getting them mixed up.
San Diego State actually plays UCLA next 2 weeks from now, and I might be able to go to that game, so I'm really excited about that. You know, the funny thing is actually UCLA is playing Coastal.
For real?
Yeah, and I was like disappointed because I'm going to be in Salt Lake City, so I'm like, but I'm not really that mad because I'd rather go to the Utah game. So
that's true.
No, anyway, so the way the show works, we'll just talk about the stuff and then we'll go forward. So let's do it. Let's first talk about USF. I want you to talk about USF. And with that, our little light show, boom, we got our colors. But you all love that. Okay, that's great. It's a real nice effect. So Ian, give me your lowdown on USF. I looked a little bit into it, but I'm kind of deferring on you because you're tapped into it there. You're going to school there. You know more than me. So give me your info.
Yeah, so I mean, you want to talk about going to behind the starting line. That is exactly what Alex Golesh is doing. Brutally honest, my expectations are very, very, very low. I know the hiring there was a lot of hoopla about the hiring because of what he did at Tennessee, and Tennessee had a fantastic offense last year. But I told a lot of people on campus that were excited about that they're like, "Oh, Golesh, he did really good. He was a great coordinator at Tennessee." And I went, "Yeah, I heard the same thing about Jeff Scott and Charlie Strong."
That's true.
So I'm not sold yet. This is the thing. I'm definitely of the mentality now, growing, maturing more, watching college football, that these coaches have to prove to me. These new hires have to prove to me that I can, trust them, that they can win these games. So far, Alex Golesh, first-time head coach. This is a big task for him. It is very, very, very important that he's able to tap into this Tampa market to get the recruiting pipeline that's seen it. There's a boatload of talent just within the Hillsborough community that he can acquire. Very similar to what UCF did with the Orlando and Atlanta Lakes area as well. That Scott Frost accumulated with that. This year, it's very tricky how to gauge USF because their schedule has a complete facelift. Pretty much conferences as you knew a year before don't exist anymore. And we talked, Pac-12 is dead. I made a joke. It was like the scene in Whose Line Is It Anyways, where I said, "Welcome to college football, where the conference names with numbers are made up and regional conference names don't matter, because you're going to have the Big Ten with 18 teams and potentially the ACC with teams in Texas. Potentially, we're going to see how that goes. Anyways, so the American, they're adding UTSA, UAB, FAU, Charlotte, I believe, is one of them, and a couple other teams. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Those are the 4. They took a lot from North Texas and Rice. Those were the other 2. I knew they were Texas teams, but now it's a whole group of competitors that USF has not played with. But I think the talent, they should be able to win more games. Let's put it get straight to the point. I think the talent is there to potentially, win these games. I don't think it's going to be as bad as last year, but I'm not expecting USF to make the bowl game jump or threaten for the American. For me, the American Conference is between Tulane, Memphis, and especially UTSA. Gary Bohannon's coming back, which is a huge play. He's, the first time I can look at the quarterback and go, you know what? I have faith that he can, make the right decision. That has been a real struggle with USF ever since Quentin Flowers left. They have not really had that signal caller that they can rely on. The problem is a lot of his receivers are either transferred or have been, graduated. So his targets are going to have to move. Luckily, Bohannon does have some mobility. With Brian Battle as with him out, and Naquan Wright coming in. Naquan Wright, both me and you saw it, Florida. He definitely has elite speed. It's just a matter of this O-line, this fresh O-line, being able to give them the lanes. I think with the competition they're playing, with the exception of Alabama, of course, let's not forget that's actually happening. There is potential that they can, the offense can, not be as anemic as was last year. Now, they were putting up points, but not nearly enough to win the games. Luckily for the defensive side, there's a lot of returning starters coming back. The defense was huge, an absolute huge Achilles heel last year. I mean, I can't name how many times they were on 3rd and 7, and I'm like, they're going to get this. Or just break off 50-yard running. The potential is there for USF to make the necessary steps that we've been expecting from them literally the past 3 years. I believe the talent is there. I believe the coaching should be there. And I think these guys are experienced enough. They've done a good job from the transfer portal getting guys in that fit with the system, that they can win more than 2 games. I don't think they go to a bowl game, but I think they will be able to pull out some of these games. Last year, when I saw USF play teams that they were even with, at least talent-wise, I was not going to go for them because I don't think they knew how to win these games. But, say they play like a North Texas or Rice, one of those teams. I think 50-50 games, they can probably pull some out. I'm not going to be over the moon with them, but I think for a first-year coach coming into an absolute mess, which is what it is, I think 4 wins would be okay for him, for Golish. Anything less than that, I will also understand, but I'm not going to be upset if, when I'm going around campus, say in December, and they're like, oh, can you believe we only won 3 games? And I'm like, no, I can believe it. Because the USF has to prove it to me that they can win these games. Unfortunately,
they've only won 4 games the last 3 years, so it totally makes sense. I mean, I'm looking at the stats now, and I had heard it earlier the other day, where South Florida was 131st in total defense, and that's dead last. And they were also, like you said, on third down. I believe they were 131st on third down conversions as well on defense, which, it's a recipe for disaster. And their offense wasn't bad last year. They scored a lot of points, and they were moving the ball, especially once Jeff Scott got fired, the offense really started to click, but the defense was so terrible that they could really never
it turned into shootouts by force.
Oh yeah, there were so many shootouts. They barely lost to UCF. I thought they were going to win that game. I
did too.
God, it was so close. I'm surprised they didn't win that game. It was amazing that they didn't. But no, and that's actually tied in with all 4 of these teams, with USC, UCLA, Florida, and USF. Is their defense has been the Achilles heel for all 4 of them. UCLA has a new defensive coordinator. USC is working with the same defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch. Florida has a new defensive coordinator in Austin Armstrong, and, obviously a new whole coaching staff with USF. So it's been, a kind of tumultuous with all four of them. And that's the key for all four of them. If they can improve there, which I think most of them have brought in better talent that have been there. USC has more returners. Florida, they have intermixed a lot of younger guys and a lot of transfers coming in. But let's speaking of that, let's dive into Florida. Well, let me give you said around like what, three or four wins that we were thinking about with USF.
I'm going to play it safe and I'm going to bet the under. I'll give them 3 wins.
Okay, because
I know for any other big time program that would suck, but I mean for USF, you got to take the baby steps.
Yeah, of course. And I've been fluctuating in between like 4 and 6 wins. I think 2 could probably be their floor, and the ceiling is probably 6. So I'm guessing probably 4. But it's also an easy conference. Like there's a lot of games that they could easily win because like they replaced Cincinnati, UCF, Houston, and those 3 are out, and now Charlotte and Rice are in. Like those teams are not that good, so those are easier games that USF has a better chance at. And there's also Temple on the schedule, and they have a chance.
They do play A&M, but also Florida Atlantic is in now, which is a winnable game. It should be a winnable. I feel like they are at a level where they should win that in terms of talent-wise. I thought it was kind of brutal. I remember saying I think I said it last year when UTSA came in, I'm like, UTSA could win the conference their first year, and USF has to go on the road and play them.
Yeah. I was looking at the stats for UTSA. Their returning quarterback is really good. He had like over 4,000 yards passing. Like that's a solid number. That is like top 10 in the country, something like that. So, I can see UTSA doing very well this year, and it's going to be a very tough game for South Florida. But so we got to that season prediction. Let's move on to Florida. Okay, so obviously this is going to be a more difficult year because of the schedule, and next year as well. I think coming into it, it looks like recruiting is really turned around. Right now, they're number 3 in the country for 2024 class. DJ Lagway is the 5-star quarterback that's coming in next year. The recruiting from the year before would have been better if it weren't for Jalen Rashada pulling whatever he did. But now it's funny because now he's the starter at Arizona State, which, showed he obviously had talent. There was just issues with the NIL. Seems like Florida has really like figured those out, with Florida victorious. So seems to be headway there. It seems like things are turning the corner, but last year they finished 6-7 with that loss to Vanderbilt, Florida State, and Oregon State. So it was all the momentum that they had built up to that point. I think they were 6-4 heading into that Vanderbilt game, really went away. And so they are trying to rebuild what they had there. And, look what happens. They got a Thursday night game in Salt Lake City against Utah, the return trip from last year's epic battle in Gainesville, where Florida pulled away at the end and won off that interception in the end zone by Amari Burney. There's no Anthony Richardson now, but Graham Mertz is there. And I wasn't the biggest fan when I heard the news that he was going to be the transfer portal pick for quarterback, because Florida was so low on quarterbacks because the issues that happened with Jalen Kitna, and then Anthony Richardson turning pro, and then obviously not getting Rashada. Then there was Marcus Stokes that had an issue, and he couldn't come on campus either. So it was all this like just snafus with these quarterback situations. And obviously the Jalen Kitna thing is terrible, and I don't even want to really talk about that. And then the other quarterback was that Austin Simmons that was supposed to reclassify, but then he ended up going to Ole Miss. So
yeah,
Florida,
I remember that.
There was potentially like 5 quarterbacks in that scenario that all could have been at Florida. I mean, at least 2 or 3 of them, and none of them showed up. I mean, that's quite remarkable in a span of like a year's time. I don't know how anything like that ever happens. Is kind of it's like a very freak occurrence. I don't imagine it happening again. Looks like DJ Lagway's coming, and that's just pretty much, you know.
I'm gonna knock on wood just for the sake of it with all
this.
I
know. Like you never know. But it seems like he's coming. So it's like that's, you know, that seems likely. But no, so let's talk about it. Okay, the schedule is obviously very hard. Austin Armstrong's here. The defense should be improved. You know, there's safety help. There was linebacker help. There was D-line help that came in the transfer portal. Cam Jackson, Nunnery, Milton, what's his name? The Michigan safety. Yeah. So all these guys coming in, you know, it seems like, you know, with the mix of the younger guys that are there, Shamar James, all the guys on the D-line, Kelby Collins, just it's a plethora of talent on the D-line. I mean, it's remarkable how many people there are. And, you know, I look at the offense, though, and I'm not as worried as the offense, though, because the offense has, you know, ETN coming back, Montrell Johnson coming back. It sucked that Cam Carroll got hurt, and I hope he gets better. You know, it really sucks because this is the same injury he had, and it's, you know, another year out for him. But, you know, wide receivers, I think, are underrated. I think Ricky Pearsall looks great, and I think is undervalued for who he is. And I think by the end of the year, he'll be on those potential lists, possibly like I would even say maybe like 3rd team SEC or maybe even 2nd team SEC. And maybe even a Biletnikoff watch list. But then also the trio coming in, those freshmen, Mizell, Wilson, and Andy Jean. You know, those guys look really good. They look really fast. And, you know, that's honestly what, you know, makes an offense that much better is the speed. And with those guys coming in and with Ricky there and some of the other guys like Douglas and Burke, you know, there's a chance that, you know, Florida's offense could be really good. You know, Mertz doesn't have to do much. I'm just expecting him to try to, you know, make some plays when needed, but not necessarily make the interceptions, which that would be the problem, because if he can cut down on the mistakes, you know, get the short and intermediate passes. And I know everyone says that on Twitter, like it's a drumbeat here, but it is true, because there wasn't really much of that. The quick game, which, you know, that's not talked about a lot on Twitter, which I'm surprised, because if the quick game is there with, you know, quick little slants and which is part of the short game, but it's also just, you know, getting plays in there that make a difference, where it's like last year we weren't really involved with that kind of quick game. And, you know, I don't know. Anthony Richardson was, a 1-game starter when he started last year. So literally had 1 game of experience as a starter coming into 2022. You know, Mertz has 32 games under his belt, and it's a lot of years playing really good defenses in the Big Ten. And you know what? I expect a lot out of him. You know, I honestly feel if he can just limit the mistakes and, you know, get the ball to his talented receivers and to his running backs out in the field, that's the other thing. We didn't see a lot of safety valve usage. It was almost always there. I don't know if you've watched some of the games. I rewatched like at least 4 or 5 games, and like there were so many times the safety valve is like 30 yards wide open, and Anthony doesn't even look their way. And I'm just like, man, if he just starts dumping, like quarterback dumps into that safety valve, it's going to start opening it up for the rest of the receivers. And like, if you just never use it, then it's like, it's never
useless.
Yeah, they don't have to account for it, so they're not going to. So it pretty much eliminates a one man right there. They don't have you take one man out of, you have an extra man in coverage for the receivers.
Add that to the grocery list of what I said that about. I can't believe Anthony Richardson won the top 5. I'm not an NFL fan, brutally honest, but like I remember some people at work they're like, oh, because they didn't know as much college football. They're like, what do you think of Anthony Richardson? I'm like, oh my God. It's like he has all the talent. And it's funny because I'm hearing the same thing. It's like he has all the talent in the world, but when it comes game time, you don't know which one you're going to get.
Yeah, but I mean, you have to remember though, he was, a redshirt sophomore when he started last year. If he had come back this year, he would be the Heisman frontrunner. There would be a ton of hype on Florida, and it would have better prepared him. But Ian, I knew he was going to get a top 10, potentially a top 5. I knew it. I had no doubt in my mind. He has all the talent in the world, and that was the difference. Regardless of how he played last year or not, they were looking more at the intangibles of what he could be, and that's obviously what got them, because he was a top 4 pick. But the one thing I wanted, I signed up with Pro Football Focus to look at their stats because it's more in depth than anything else you can find online. But last year, because speaking of Anthony's inconsistencies, Florida was 108th in drop passes last year at 123 drop passes by the receivers. So I looked and I double checked and I was like curious because like Mertz obviously struggled the last 2 years, and I was wondering if there was some correlation there. And I looked, in the last 2 years, as far as drop passes, in 21, they had 92 drop passes. And then in 2022, they had 109 drop passes. So clearly, Wisconsin had their problems as well at receiver. And thus, that is the reason why you see a lower completion percentage for quarterbacks like Anthony and Mertz, is because if you include per game one less drop, all those per each game, which is like I think 12 more completions, it like ups the completion percentage like 5 points or something like that. And it's quite remarkable what literally all they have to do is just not drop the ball like a tenth like of a percentage, and or like 10% less, and the completion percentage goes up, and then it doesn't look as bad. So it's like clearly the completion percentage has a chance to make a difference there if the drops are not there. So it's like you have to take these two quarterbacks with a grain of salt the last 2 years. Yes, Anthony obviously struggled with some things, not seeing the safety valves, not running more often than he should have, and missing some. He was less accurate, but he also didn't get very much help from his receivers, and nor did Graham Mertz. I think the team, the receivers overall, I don't know if they're necessarily better because Justin Shorter is on an NFL team, but last year was pretty tough. There wasn't, like, by the end of the year, it was only Ricky Pearsall that was playing in the FSU game, and a lot of the other guys were hurt. So I don't know. And Xavier Henderson is gone, but I'm expecting that if the team can go 8 wins, which that's where I'm shooting at, because like I have like a floor of like 6 wins and then like a ceiling of like 9-10 wins, and I'm thinking the sweet spot is probably 8-4. And where I'm thinking that is with their schedule, I'm thinking they beat Utah. I'm thinking they possibly beat Tennessee. They may lose to Kentucky, probably lose to Georgia, probably lose to LSU, but then I have them beating Florida State. So there, I think, is a good enough record right there. And I think a lot of people will take 8-4. It's not perfect and it's not great, but it's better than what there were last year. And they also will probably do better on defense because they were basically this this last 3-4 year stretch for their defense has been the worst that it's ever been. So there's really only one way up, or one way to move, and it's up. And I think they're going to improve. And I like Austin Armstrong. He brings a lot of energy. He's seems to be highly coveted. He was with Alabama for a brief moment as the linebacking coach before Billy tabbed him as the D coordinator. So we'll see what happens, and we'll see right away, because Salt Lake City is next Thursday. It's a week from tomorrow, but we'll see what happens. But Ian, I want to hear your thoughts on the Florida Gators.
So for me, I'm still in prove me wrong. That was the most frustrating thing with the Gators last year, is that I still can't get a gauge on what games can this team win. They can beat Utah and then have an awful game against Kentucky. They can blow out South Carolina and then get in their own way against Vandy. They can give LSU a run for their money and then let it slip away against Florida State. I didn't know what team to make. It was a very frustrating year, and I'm going into this season, I'm not the most optimistic about this year, because there was a lot of guys gone, a lot of Graham Mertz coming in. I do believe I think I mentioned this last year too, but I'm going to say it again. I think the team will play better. I think they will look better. I think now that controversial take, I think Anthony Richardson was the thing that was both helping and killing that offense. The entire offense ran through him. It wasn't really the identity of the offense was whatever Anthony Richardson does. So it was make or break on him. Now this year, it's clear cut and simple. Give ETN and Montrell Johnson the ball and let those guys run wild. It's very similar how I am viewing this offense to how Alabama and Georgia have run their offenses in years past. It's where you let your quarterback, set up those play action passes to get guys like Ricky Pierce all open. Very high percentage chances, but I mean, at most, you're going to let Mertz maybe throw 20, 21 passes. But if you can show that ETN and Montrell Johnson can get that space, can, get through the defensive line, then, you're not going to need it. And I do think that the rushing attack, I think, will be, the crux of everything. The offensive line is very new, very young. It's going to really come down to, how well these, transfer guys and first-year guys coming in. I believe the only returning one was Austin Barber. Yeah. So the good news is knowing Robert Sale, he was an offensive line guy, so he will do a good job always coaching them. Just a matter of performing.
They have two offensive line coaches. I can't remember the other guy's name, but Rob Sale is he's the one, and he's also technically the offensive coordinator, which I don't even think he's offensive coordinator because Billy calls the plays. So but no, go ahead.
I'm just going to be in prove me wrong mode. I know I bet well under last year, but this year they say, you as well, it's been 6 to 8 win range. I'm just right now. My cousin said the same thing. He says I'm maybe 7, 8 wins. And when I look through the schedule and I'm going, okay, McNeese State, you're looking at Charlotte, and then you go, God knows Vandy, maybe, and then maybe Arkansas. My problem is looking at that schedule, I'm struggling to find the other wins.
Well, I'm not a believer in Missouri. I've never been a believer.
Missouri, that was the other one I was. So Mizzou
is a clown, and I'm almost positive he's going to get fired by the end of this year. And then I'm definitely not a believer in Florida State. They beat a lot of terrible teams last year and lost to the teams that were good that they played. Plus, I have a feeling that Florida State's going to come into September and they're going to lose to LSU in that first game, and they're going to lose to Clemson. So they're going to be 2-2. And then I have them also losing to Wake Forest, which I don't think FSU fans realize. They got beat by them last year, and it was a pretty Wake Forest beat them handedly. And I like their quarterback that's there at Wake Forest. I think he's
Hartman.
No, Hartman left and went to Notre Dame. It's
that's right. Oh God,
it's this other kid. I can't remember his name, but he played 4 games the last 2 years and put up pretty big numbers, and has been there a few years. So he's got a really good handle on the system, and the coach, seems pretty confident in him. I was watching the ACC network does like a road trip show where they do like a showcase on each team coming in, and I watched the whole thing, and I was like, I was intrigued because I was like, I looked at some of the games that Florida State is going to play, and I'm like, all right, which games do they potentially might lose? And I was like, all right, maybe Pittsburgh, maybe Wake Forest, maybe Syracuse. But the more I looked at Pittsburgh and Syracuse, I was like, nah, I don't think either of them really have a shot. I think Florida State's going to beat both of them. But I was looking at Wake Forest. It was like, 1, it's on the road. And then 2, Wake has a lot of returning players, and their quarterback has played in a couple of games and has experience in the system. So I have a feeling that game will go Wake's way. And then I like I said, I really think that Florida is going to beat them, because I think the games in Gainesville last year, Florida barely lost that game. If the defense was just like, if they could have made, like, instead of all the broken tackles that were, if there was like 10 less missed tackles, they probably win that game. And so it's like that game was very close. They just couldn't tackle, and the defense was terrible. That was the whole reason why Florida State was moving the ball. I mean, Ricky Pearsall went off in the first half, and then Etienne had a really solid game. So it's like and then Anthony, couldn't complete a pass for like a quarter and a half, and that was a real downfall there too. But I just think Florida, I think they can beat them. I don't think that Florida State is necessarily on that college football playoff level yet. I think they're recruiting this year better than they've done in probably 7-8 years, and that'll pay dividends. But there's a lot of transfer guys that came in that are taking those roster spots, and so once those guys go, there's going to be a huge hole of experience, and it's going to be next year, not this year, but next year for Florida State will be a lot tougher. I don't expect much out of them in 2024, but no, this is allegedly their year, their time to shine. They're, potentially a playoff team by all the media picks. Travis is, potentially, Jordan Travis is potentially a Heisman frontrunner, but I don't believe that either. I mean, in most games against good teams, he performed poorly, and he really feasted on bad teams. So I don't expect Florida State to be in the playoff. I definitely expect them to lose to Clemson, and I definitely expect them to lose to LSU. Those two guaranteed. The other two, Wake and Florida, I'm probably like 60% they'll lose, but we'll see. Okay, so what do you think? You've got a season total of like 6-6 for Florida?
5-7.
Okay, 5-7. Wow, Ian, that's right.
And even if that is true,
yeah,
I am still not panicking. This is the thing. First of all, have you seen the Swamp King documentary
yet? I need to. It's just I've been busy dealing with all this stuff, but I will watch it this weekend.
So Paul Feinbaum, in the first episode, they were talking about the culture of Florida. Paul Feinbaum was talking about Urban Meyer coming in, and he goes, Florida, Urban Meyer was going into a program with a fan base that is notoriously impatient. And I went, yep, that is what is run out all of these coaches. And I'm going back to this, and this is in my article. I can't think. I'm going back to every single first-year coach and saying, okay, who has had to have the toughest job in their first couple of years? And I went all the way back to Charlie Pell in 1978.
Yeah.
Because Galen Hall, the whole thing, Charlie Pell got fired, and then Galen Hall took over, so that doesn't count. Spurrier came in, and that had a lot of talent already there. Zook recruited well for Meyer.
Yeah.
All that stuff. I can't think, besides Charlie Pell in 1978, that's 1978 to 2022 when Billy Napier, there is no way a Florida coach has gone through a tougher mountain to climb taking that job than Billy Napier this millennium. So,
yeah,
the expectations for me going immediately when he was hired, this team does not have the elite talent yet. Big emphasis on yet. Right now, I think this is still clear rebuilding year. I don't expect them to compete for the division, for the SEC championship. I don't see them as dark horse. I'm just viewing them at basic level. I think the team will play better. It is a very good sign that the recruiting has picked up. That is really what is going to bring this team back. And it's great that Billy Napier is doing such a good job on the recruiting trail so far. But still this year, I'm going to say Cassius won 3 and 4. That's when I'm going to make my judgment, because at that time, that's his kids, that's his classes. Let's see how he does with that. I hope they prove me wrong. I've been saying this the past couple of years, but that's the thing. They have to prove me wrong. They were too inconsistent this year for me to trust them to win these games against honestly better teams. I do think this year, however, originally, you want to know how kind of pessimistic I was. When the schedule first came out, I had them winning 3 games. And I was able to bump it up to 5 going through all that, because I feel like there are more 50-50 games for them that they can win. And that was the problem last year. If it was a 50-50 game, I don't think it was going to go their way. But now,
Ian, last year even they went 8 and 4. They went 6-6 in the season, and they easily, if there was like a little bit more effort in that Vanderbilt game, they easily could have won that game. They should have. They're clearly a better team than Vanderbilt. They just, fucked around on so many different aspects of that game, and didn't really. Their effort was very sloppy. It was definitely something that they needed to play better, and Vanderbilt took advantage of that. But clearly, Florida is more talented than Vanderbilt. And then also in that Florida State game, like I said, that was a much closer game. Like literally, Florida had the ball with 40 seconds left inside the 20-yard line, with a chance to score to either win it. They could have won it outright if they went for 2 there, if they scored the touchdown. So they had the chance. It's not like, they didn't belong in that game. They didn't get really smoked in the Vanderbilt game either. It's just, they smoked South Carolina and they smoked Texas A&M, and it looked like the momentum was building, and they could have finished off 8 and 4. And if they finished 8 and 4 that last year, more guys probably would have played the bowl game, and they probably would have played a better opponent too. I mean, even though Oregon State is a really
I'm brutally honest, I never really count bowl games as part of the regular. Now I don't, because
I'm just
got
talking
all those
about
guys
final record. It doesn't.
Yeah.
Matter. But I'm just saying, in general, if they had more momentum, being 8 and 4, finishing off the season off a 4-game win streak, things looking up, recruiting was going better. There would have been a lot of momentum built going into that bowl game, and maybe Anthony plays. Who knows? I don't know. You never know. And it doesn't matter, because the bowl games really don't matter, because unless you're in the playoff, the game after the last regular season game doesn't matter, except for conference championships. But, so regardless, let's move on, because we've got other stuff we got to talk about. So I'm going to talk about USC and UCLA real quick. So USC, Caleb Williams comes back, Heisman winner, chance to repeat as a Heisman. would be only the second two-time winning Heisman winner. Lincoln Riley's just got things going for them, man. They've got a lot of great pieces on offense. They bring in a really excellent receiver from Arizona, Dorian Singer, who replaces Jordan Addison, who left to the NFL. Travis Dye left USC at the end of the year and is in the NFL now. And there's a bevy of backs there that are going to replace his workload. There's one from South Carolina, Marshawn Lloyd, that looks to fill the void. And then the receivers, really awesome group of guys, Taj Washington, Mario Williams, Brendan Rice, all contributed last year. I can really see this offense doing well. The offensive line brings a lot back, including Tarquin from Florida, the offensive lineman from Florida, Tarquin. And so the offense looks great for USC, and I expect, a big output from them to maybe be the leading offensive team in the country. It's potential to be. I mean, Caleb Williams is amazing, especially if he stays healthy. I expect a lot out of him. Now, the real key for this whole team is the defense with, Alex Grinch coming back as a defensive coordinator. I'm not really sold on him yet. I was kind of tentative last year, and they struggled. They were the 106th best defense regarding run defense, and giving up 106th best defense overall, but they were just weaker on the run than they were the pass. They gave up 423 yards on the total, and like a bunch of touchdowns. It was 54 touchdowns. So they really struggled defensively, and I really think the guys that they have returning, they seem to be, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of talent there. I'm not sold on Grinch yet. Like if he can make a difference there, that would be what propels them into, last year where they lost those Utah games. Maybe they win those Utah games, because in that first Utah game, they gave up like 43 points, I think. And I think the second one, they gave up a lot too. So it's like, if they can cut that down to like only giving up like 24 points, 25 points, their offense is going to score. So it's like, if they just keep it in the ballpark, they're going to have a really good chance. The thing that sets out USC this year that's going to make it, that's going to help them a lot, is the first half of the year. The first 5 games are against teams with a combined record of 21-51. So they're going to coast through the first half of the schedule. They don't really have a game until Notre Dame. And by the way, spoiler alert, I have Notre Dame as one of my 4 teams in the playoff. And I'll tell you why. Sam Hartman transferring in from Wake Forest. I've been a huge fan of Sam Hartman. The guy is just a stud college quarterback. I don't know if it's going to translate into the NFL, but he does amazing, in college. And I think it's going to be the difference. This will be the best talented quarterback that Notre Dame has had since, God, man, I don't know. Because I never thought Brady Quinn was that talented.
I was going to say Brady Quinn was the last one I could
never
think
thought
of.
Clausen was that talented. I never thought. It's just a whole host. Like, I don't even remember the last time, probably in my lifetime of watching football, have I seen a quarterback as talented as Sam Hartman. I am huge on Notre Dame. I think with Marcus Freeman, like feeling it now after last year kind of struggled there at the beginning of the year. They really turned it on at the end. They beat South Carolina in that bowl game. I really think they can make a difference this year. And I have them going 11-1 and losing to, I have it. Let's see. I have Notre Dame losing to Clemson. So it's a tough game. It's a Clemson on the road. So there's a chance they could lose that. But regardless, I think Notre Dame is going to beat USC. But with that, if they lose to Notre Dame, it's not the end of the world because they still have the Pac-12 conference championship to get into. So they just have to beat that murderer's row, which that's the really tough part because they have Utah, they have UCLA, they have Oregon, they have Washington. So it's a really tough road at the end of the year. The first half's really easy. So they can rest up the guys, play it a lot of the younger guys, get ready for that second half. But as of right now, because I think the defenses might be the weakness, I think they might lose one of the Oregon or UCLA games, and I'm leaning towards more the Oregon game because the Oregon game is on the road. So I have USC potentially going 10-2, but if they can fix things defensively, I think they can get to 11-1, get to the conference championship game, which I think they still might, even if they go 10-2, get to the Pac-12 championship game. If they go 11-1, get to the Pac-12 conference game, then they have a chance to get in the playoff. But we'll see. And I do like Caleb to repeat as the Heisman winner. Okay, on to UCLA. So real quick about UCLA. Again, it's a struggle defensively. These teams have been very bad defensively. All four of these teams, USF, Florida, UCLA, USC. And so that's the real struggle here. So it's like, if you can't stop anyone, you're not going to really beat a lot of teams, and especially in those close games, because the close games is where you make a difference. Because when you can make stops and get the ball back in the offense, and then the offense runs out the clock, then you're going to win those games. So as far as UCLA, they return a lot on offense. They lose Zach Charbonneau and DTR, which was 2/3 of their rushing attack. But they have two transfers coming in, Carson Steele from Ball State and Anthony Atkins from Army. They also have TJ Harden and Colton Yankoff return, and another guy, Keegan Jones, who's going to split between wide receiver and running back. So the running backs look solid. They could be a strength there for them. They haven't decided on their QB. That's kind of up in the air. They were the sixth best rushing attack. So if they continue that trend, they'll definitely be solid on offense. They had 6 yards per carry, which was best in the country last year, which is kind of crazy. It was that good. But Chip Kelly is a wizard with offensive scheming. The line returns for just the right guard that they're replacing. Wide receiver J. Michael Sturdivant from Cal and Kyle Ford from USC come in. Sturdivant had 755 yards and Ford had 365. So pretty good contributions there. So look to elevate the passing attack. Some of the returners are Nam Brown, Logan Loya, and Titus Mokaya Atamalala. Now defense, they're returning 9, so there's a chance that there could be some better play there because they have more experience coming in. And the other thing, now this is the difference between USC. USC kept their coordinator. Well, UCLA did not. They have a new one coming in. It's Danton Lynn. He's actually the son of the former Los Angeles Chargers head coach. And, the
Chargers are in LA.
Yeah. And he was a safety coach for the Ravens last year. So he's young. He's only like 33, but he looks to turn around the defense, which was the 87th ranked defense last year. They gave up 403 yards a game. So it was obviously very bad. And they need to make stops just like USC as well. For them, as far as predictions, I have them going 9-3 with losses to Utah, Coastal Carolina, and Oregon State. So I know you would like that, Ian, that they Coastal. Okay, so all right, we got the teams out of the way. Now let's go into conference picks. Ian, so let's start it off with SEC. Who do you got SEC winning?
Until somebody beats Georgia. I mean, that's literally what it's going to be. I can't see anybody right now winning the SEC. I mean, Bama, LSU, there are competitors. But again, I'm of the prove me wrong mentality. Somebody has to show that they can beat Georgia. So I'm going to say right now, Georgia three-peats is, or actually, no, repeats as SEC champions because I forgot the first national championship they lost to Bama.
Okay, so who's in the West? Who's coming out of the West?
So that I'm going to go with. I'm going to go with. It's a typical pick, but I think Bama pulls it out this year. There are a lot. The games they lost were by one score, and they did not play well. That was not, Tennessee and LSU. That was more. Bama kind of just let that game get away. So I think now, and with a very pissed off Nick Saban, who's now of the mentality of, oh, now everybody's doubting me, which is terrifying. Pray for USF in week 3. That's all I'm saying. I'm going to see rematch Bama, Georgia, although my sleeper pick would be LSU.
Okay, and that's who my sleeper is. And I have Georgia and Alabama as well. And I have Bama as of right now, but really it's tentative because it depends on the quarterback situation with Bama. And I really think if they don't figure that out, it'll more than likely be LSU. Because, Jaden Daniels, as much as I'm not the biggest believer in him, he seemed to, figure things out the latter half of the year, especially after that Tennessee game where they got smoked, and they did a lot better besides the Georgia game. But no, yes, Georgia is good. And but you have to realize, Ian, Carson Beck didn't beat out Stetson Bennett. And I know that he obviously is talented coming out of high school, but he hasn't really played that much like in game, so how do we even know how good he is? I know there's a lot of talent on offense, Brock Bowers, the running backs. They bring in that wide receiver from Mizzou, but I don't know. The defense will obviously be better. Not better than the last 2 years, but I mean better than the offense. It's going to be a heavy defensive team. I think if Carson Beck can not make as many mistakes, they'll likely go through the schedule. And that's the other thing. The schedule is so easy. So regardless of how Beck is, Georgia should be able to go through it. But all right, so I'm going to write this article that I'm going to come out with next Friday. And I worked on something after last season where I went through the record of the 4 rivals of Georgia, of Florida, Auburn, Tennessee, and Georgia Tech. And I went through every single record and went through the stats. And literally, if you think about it, the last 5-6 years since Kirby has been there, those teams have basically been terrible and fluctuating. And there have only been, I think only Auburn has beaten Georgia once, and Florida has beaten Georgia like twice. It's either like 3 or 4 between those 6 years, 6 or 7 years between those 4 teams. There's like 3 victories for all 4 of those teams against Georgia. And now you can just say, oh yeah, Georgia's very good. But you can also say all of those 4 teams went through at least 3 coaches in that time. So, 3 coaches. So, that's a lot of turmoil between all those teams. And yes, Georgia contributed to that misery for those teams. But if all those teams are doing bad, because they did bad against everyone, it wasn't like those teams were doing bad against just Georgia. They were doing bad against every team they played. So if those 4 teams are doing better, which, spoiler alert, last year Heupel got Tennessee to 11-2. Billy Napier is trying to turn around Florida, which potentially he can. Hugh Freeze at Auburn has something going there. He's recruiting through the roof. and he knows offense. And then the Georgia Tech alum, which I don't know too much about. I looked into him. He seems like he could be all right. It's a hard place to coach. It's a very good school academically. So they don't get a ton of like big time recruits. Like really only in the last like 20 years, I only really remember Calvin Johnson that was a big time recruit that came to Georgia Tech. So we'll see. But it seems like those 4 teams are turning the corner. And so if now, and instead of Georgia just penciling in those 4 games as victories, they now have to lose a game or 2, possibly almost every year. That changes the calculus immensely. It goes from, oh, we can just pencil in 4 victories to, oh, wait, we might actually lose one of these games. And then when they're playing like Alabama, or they play LSU, or they play an Ole Miss or Texas A&M, there's a potential of them losing that game as well. So they go from losing to maybe just 1 with those SEC West teams to now potentially losing another game. So they could have 2 losses where that would, I know the playoff is changing into 12 teams, but it completely changes the calculus. It really does. So I'm going to write that article, and I know there's more to it that I'm going to get more in depth about, but yeah, that's just my theory and my I'm positing with this. And I know Georgia fans are probably going to give me shit, but I don't really give a fuck. So, okay, moving on to Big Ten. Who do you got, Ian?
I'm not trying to be, typical, but I think Ohio State has too much talent. I've said that almost every year I have been on this show, but I don't think there's a way Michigan beats them 3 times in a row. I think Ohio State, this is really a make or break year. They have to beat Michigan, and I think they will. I think there's enough. Now Ohio State was more talented last year, but they couldn't find a way to win. That's the difference. I think they find a way to, stop the running game for Michigan. I think they go into the Indianapolis and they win the Big Ten. And I could see them in the playoff. I think I know they have a lot of quarterback controversy right now, but again, I don't think the quarterback play is the problem when you have Marvin Harrison Jr. as your wide receiver. You could probably throw it in quadruple coverage and he'll probably find a way to come down with it.
Their receiving core is very stout for sure.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with the Buckeyes out of the Big Ten.
Who's your other conference championship game opponent in that one?
I'm going to pull. I mean, God, the Big Ten West is such a joke. It's between Iowa or Wisconsin. I'll go. I think Wisconsin. I'm going to go with them. I think it is Luke Fickell's first year, but I think the schedule provided for them, I think there's enough there. But I'll say Wisconsin or Iowa.
Who's your surprise team out of there?
I would say actually would be Penn State. Penn State, there hasn't been as much talk about Penn State. They have a lot of returning starters. They have a lot of good players out of there. I think Penn State may give some of these top teams some trouble. Like, I would not be surprised if one of the losses, Michigan, Ohio State, those guys have, is against Penn State. Because if you go to, the whiteout, it's tough.
Yeah, I agree. I like Penn State as my sleeper too. I think Michigan's going to win again because I think J.J. McCarthy is more the stable force there than over Ohio State, which they're trying to figure out their quarterback situation. And then my kind of surprise pick for the West division is Illinois. Brett Bielema has done pretty well. The West sucks, so it doesn't really matter. Whoever wins the East is more than likely going to win. But I've got Illinois out of there. But in my my picks for Michigan, how their record's going to go, I feel like Penn State is going to beat them, but I feel that Penn State is going to lose 2 games, and then that Michigan will be the team that goes to represent the East. Okay, let's move on to speaking of ACC. Let's go to the ACC. I've got Clemson over FSU And then I feel that Wake is my sleeper. But who do you got?
I'm gonna go same Clemson and FSU because this is the first year without divisions, right?
Yeah, no divisions yet.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go Clemson and FSU, and I'm gonna go North Carolina with Drake May. I'm gonna go with
Yeah,
them.
yeah, yeah. I do like North Carolina too, but I just feel like I don't know. I feel like this Wake team is going to surprise people, and I may be wrong, but I mean these are just sleepers, so it doesn't sound like we're expecting these teams to actually do it. Okay, moving to the Big 12. I've got Texas going up against Kansas State, and my surprise team is going to be Texas Tech because there seems to be some hype about them for some reason, and I'm curious to see what happens. But yeah, I'm going to go with Texas, Kansas State, and Texas Tech. I like Kansas State because they bring a lot back, starting quarterbacks back. Texas brings Quinn Ewers. I love Quinn Ewers. I think they can beat Alabama, which I think that's going to happen. So I think Alabama is going to go 11-1, and their loss coming to Texas. And but I think Texas is just going to miss the playoff by like just a hair, by like maybe like a loss or two in the Big 12. But what do you got in the Big 12, Ian?
So I have Texas winning that one over Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
In that one, and my surprise team would. I think TCU actually isn't going to be as bad this year. I know it's weird for a team that was just in the national championship, but I don't think they're going to go like 4-8. This is definitely a rebuilding year, but I think they got enough there to, make a bowl game, make a game, potentially New Year's 6.
They only return 3 on offense, though. They return a lot on defense, and they brought like a decent amount of decent transfers and recruits coming in. But let's move on. Pac-12. I've got UCLA as my surprise team, and then USC going up against Washington. So I think USC is going to win that, and then USC is going to be in the playoff. That's what I got. So what do you got, Ian?
For that one, I'm going to take USC playing and finally winning against Utah. Again, I think it's going to be the same thing as last year, but I think USC gets the upper hand this year. And my under the radar team, I'm gonna excuse me. I would probably say Washington. It's weird saying that Washington is under the radar because they have a lot of talent, but
Penix Jr., man, he's a stud. You know that. We've talked about that for a long time, how good he is. I'm surprised more people don't know who he is. It's mainly because he got hurt at Indiana, so it kind of like stymied what was going on with him. And then when he's been at Washington since last year, and being on the West Coast is always such a detriment to media access because they don't seem to show a lot of stuff from people on the West Coast. Doesn't get as much love on the East Coast. So, Michael Penix, I envision in the top 3 quarterbacks being drafted next year, Caleb Williams, Drake May, and then Michael Penix Jr. That's what I have as of right now. So, okay. So I gave mine. All right, let's do playoff. Who do you got for playoff, Ian?
So end of year predicting. I'm going to go Georgia, Ohio State, Texas, and then I'm going to put USC.
Okay. What's your matchups in those games?
Georgia will play Ohio State. Texas will play USC.
And who wins those two?
I'm going to go Georgia beats Texas. USC beats Ohio State. And then for the national championship, I think USC would win it.
So Georgia, USC, and USC winning?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. I don't even have Georgia in my. Who's your 5 and 6? Who's your 2 teams out?
Bama and Utah.
Bama and Utah. Wow. Okay, I have Notre Dame, USC, Michigan, and Alabama. But Alabama is really contingent on that quarterback play. If it's really shaky, then I'm going to be really disappointed. But whatever, this is what I'm going with. And then I have Texas and Clemson at my 5 and 6. I have Notre Dame playing Alabama and USC playing Michigan. And I'm going to say USC beats Michigan. And then I'm going to say Notre Dame beats Alabama. And then it's going to be, that's going to be a rematch of that game. I wonder. I'm going to say Notre Dame. And I'm you know me. I've never been a supporter of Notre Dame. I just feel like this is the most talented quarterback they've ever had. The talent there now has been pretty good the last 2 years with Marcus Freeman with the recruiting he's done. I think if there's ever a chance for Notre Dame to win the playoff, it's
here
this year. So I expect them to do great things this year. They have a really hard schedule. They play Clemson, they play Wake Forest, they play USC, they play Louisville, which is a tough team. I think they play. There's another hard team. I can't remember. Navy on the road or in Ireland is going to be tough. I know, and I don't have Georgia here, but I honestly feel like I didn't talk about it too much when I was bringing up that theory, which is I think Georgia's going to lose to Auburn, and I think Georgia's going to lose to Ole Miss as well. So they'll still get to the SEC championship game or Tennessee. So it's either going to be Ole Miss or Tennessee. So I think they're going to lose to Auburn. That game's on the road. The Tennessee game's on the road. The Ole Miss game's at home, but I think they're going to lose 2 of those 3, and more than likely it's going to be Auburn, and then depending on Ole Miss and Tennessee, we'll see. But so that's 10-2, and then they'll lose to Alabama, so that would completely knock them out of playoff consideration. So let's move on to Heisman. We forgot to do that, but who's your? Let's go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So who's your 5th guy?
I actually had 4.
Okay, there you go.
I would say my 4 would be Marvin Harrison Jr.
Yep.
3, Sam Hartman.
Yep.
2, Brock Bowers, and 1, Caleb Williams.
Yeah, it's pretty similar to mine. I have Sam at 5, Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4. I got Michael Penix Jr. and I got Drake May, and then I got Caleb Williams. I think unless Caleb gets hurt, I really think he's gonna. It's his
Heisman to lose. It's his to lose.
And I don't think the voters are too concerned about him being a 2-time winner, because it's only been Archie Griffin from Ohio State. So it's I don't think they're I think it used to be a thing because when Tebow was there, they were really hesitant about it, even though they probably could have given it to him one of those years. But it was
especially 08.
Yeah, 08 for sure. And it's I really think that if Caleb does as good or better or around the same, that he will run away with it. So yeah, that's all those. Let's do real quick week 0 and then let's call it a show. So for week 0, Notre Dame, Navy, what do you got, Ian?
I think Notre Dame wins this one. Navy has been a pain in the ass to these teams, though. Yeah. So I'm going to say they struggle a bit, but I'm going to go Irish in Ireland 28-16.
28-16 Irish?
Yes.
All right. I got 38 to, I'll say 20 Notre Dame. And then the USC, I'm double checking just to make sure.
Trojan. I know it's San Jose State. So Trojans. San Diego or I'm pretty sure it's San Jose State.
Let me see. Yeah, San
Whoever
Jose.
has their billboard at Sharks games, that's who it is.
Yeah.
That's how I know San Jose State.
Yeah,
I watch
San Jose
Sharks
State.
games.
So what's your prediction there?
I'm gonna relive a quote from Keyshawn Johnson when he was in the NFL. This is the type of game where you're USC and you're playing San Jose State. You put your foot on their throat and you don't let up.
Yeah,
62-7, Trojans, the USC variety.
yeah, I don't know if they're going to score that much. They could. They definitely have the offense too. I'm going to say I'll say 45 to 20. That's what I'm going with. Cool. Well, that is the show, everyone. This is what we do. We talk about college football. We love this sport. Me and Ian are huge fans. We talk about this as much as we can when we come on the show. Going forward, the show is going to be every Wednesday and every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific. You can find it on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. It'll be broadcast there, and then I'll have it on a podcast form where it'll be all podcast formats. You can find it there. You can find us at Hater_radio for Twitter, Instagram. For YouTube, it's at Hater Radio, one word. Ian's social medias is at GGatorG2. You can find us there. Reach us also at haterradio1@gmail.com. I just incorporated this business. I obviously have a good camera. It obviously looks like a good image. And I spent a lot of money to do this. And, I love this sport. I'm going to try to do more live broadcasts. I'm going to Salt Lake City for the Utah game. So if you come to the Salt Lake City game, any Florida fans, hit me up. I'm there. I'm wanting to hang out. Well, I'll probably hang out Wednesday night before the game. I'll be broadcasting outside the stadium before the game. Probably take the camera out, have recording some stuff as we're going on. So see me there. I'm going to try to go to the Florida State game at the end of the year. I may even go to the Florida LSU game as well in Louisiana, because that may be the last time they play LSU for a little while in Baton Rouge.
Oh, and God, yeah, they're doing this stupid.
Yeah. And and I might go to, or maybe the USC Oregon game, but I'm going to go to a lot of USC, UCLA games. So check me there. Check for our broadcast for stuff. Check our articles. I have the USC season preview up. Ian has a Florida Gators and USF Bulls season previews coming up in the next couple of days. UCLA's will be around there as well. Look out for our articles, all kinds of stuff we have going on. So thank you, and have a good night, everybody.